We'll be speaking about a meta-science approach to commercializing and building products in decentralized ecosystems. And so I will now bring Iyore to be a panelist. So first we'll start off with a brief bio about Iyore. Named to two Forbes magazine 30 under 30 lists for her profound work at the age of 22, Iyore N. Olaye is an award-winning engineer, turned technology executive, investor, and world-renowned speaker. Olaye is at the forefront of innovation and intersecting the digital and physical worlds. Olaye is a co-founder and managing partner of Covered by Group, a technology advisory and investment audio firm. And also, in addition, Olaye is the managing partner of SFF, a pre-seed investment fund by Sousa Ventures. So we're so excited to have Iyore here today. How's it going?
Hi, everyone. It's going very well. And I'm very excited to be talking about this topic, especially through this lens. So super excited to dig right in. And thank you for the wonderful introduction.
Perfect. So for our first question that we have here is, so you have experience building products and serving as an executive at technology companies, intersecting the digital and physical worlds in various industries such as smart cities, transportation, sustainability, health and wellness, and now even Web3. So what exactly are the challenges and what is exciting about building products in this new decentralized ecosystem?
Yeah, absolutely. So as I mentioned, or as you mentioned, I have had deep experience building and launching and scaling companies, whether it be through mergers and acquisitions and through IPOs. And I found that some of the best solutions happen when innovation and incentives are directly aligned. And typically that is through the lens of investors and technology executives or early stage teams thinking through what that alignment means. And then oftentimes that trickles down internally to other individuals who are building within. And what I love about the decentralized ecosystems that we're now engaging in is that everyone can feel a part of that process. They understand how they're collaborating and contributing, and you're able to really understand how incentives are defined, set, and what that means for your work, but also the success of the project. And then also, if we're thinking from a business sense. Oftentimes, when we see research and development, technically, there are research teams who are hyper focused on a solution, and they're not always thinking through commercialization at that point. And when they get to a point where there is a breakthrough or an insight, there are many different ways that you can start to define what like return on investment is, what does commercialization actually look like, what does that actually mean for customers? And that's a really exciting perspective, but it also takes a lot of time. And oftentimes what that means is that you end up having teams that start to hyper focus on a arm of their opportunity or the problem that they're trying to solve in order to really start to define what profitability looks like. And they end up building a really siloed solution that oftentimes doesn't necessarily tackle the entire scope of the challenge. So when we think about the digital and physical world, there's tons of different sectors that require an extensive amount of time. And so the reality that in this decentralized world, you can have many different individuals who have extensive knowledge on a topic, but separate focus coming together in order to create a collaborative solution that can actually be something that's commercializable.
That's great, especially, what's happening is that things and products are being built so fast in this new environment. And so many communities now, quote unquote, DAOs, are in this new decentralized ecosystems are now taking the next step to figure out exactly if their community is fundable as a business and if they create a product, can that be commercialized? So I'd love to kind of hear your thoughts about that and what's happening in the space.
Absolutely. And that's part of the reason why I loved our topic so much and thinking about it through the lens of a meta science approach. And so the question that I would ask any individual who is a part of a decentralized group, whether it's formally a DAO or a group of individuals coming together to focus on a problem, is have they built before? Have they studied the processes and procedures of taking an idea from incubation through research, through development, through consumer testing and thinking and asking the basic question, will someone pay for this solution, right? If you're thinking about a DAO that might be coming together for a solution that they ultimately want to see some type of return on investment for. But what we're also seeing are tons of communities coming together around a problem that they want to solve. And the really interesting aspect here, and one thing that I would just encourage everyone to think through is if the group together has thought through the process and procedure of building out these products, have they failed? Have they been successful? And are those learnings complementary in a really interesting way? And the reality is that oftentimes we know that when a problem that ends up turning into a solution is identified, it is something that the founder themselves has a unique experience with. The fun thing about decentralized ecosystems is that many different individuals might have a unique insight or unique experience that may transition into more specificity for a specific solution. And so one thing that I would caution anyone potentially involved in or participating in an ecosystem is not searching to solve a problem just to solve a problem, but really making sure that the problem that they're trying to solve and the solution that they come up with is something that their sector actually needs and that customers will actually be willing to pay for. So that's kind of what I would say there. Very exciting times to really kind of get many different learned experiences in one single center. But then also I would caution that you aren't just looking to solve a problem for problem's sake, that you understand exactly the problem that you're trying to solve, why it's important, and can build collaboratively quickly to get that to market.
Really interesting. So I know that in addition to you building products, you also are an investor. And so this is a really, new, exciting space, but not traditionally a space where you see a lot of external funding or even venture funding. So do you have any advice for investors, either angel investors or traditional investors that are watching this who want to do due diligence in this space, invest in this space, and from the lens of that through the commercialization of products?
Absolutely. And this is very complementary to kind of what I was discussing previously. As an investor, you're, especially at the early stage, hyper focused on the team. And the really cool thing about decentralized ecosystems is that that team can be quite large. However, the question that you'd want to ask is there a single heartbeat that is making a group or ecosystem thrive and ideate and deliver? Or are there multiple heartbeats that are focused on a sector of that group or ecosystem? And are they kind of sharing that load of creating a vision and setting the eyes and the sights of other collaborators on that? The reality is that is the risk with a decentralized ecosystem. If you have a single individual, if that person becomes less engaged or shifts gears, how does that impact the ecosystem and what is that transitional moment? But when you think about looking and examining the opportunities to invest into decentralized ecosystems, thinking through if there's many different nodes that if one node were to shut down or to underperform, can the other node support it? And if that answer is yes, then that's something that should be considered when thinking through whether or not this investment is both reliable, but also sustainable for the long term. But additionally, I typically use a ROSE framework. So team and timing, something that we just thought about. Team being, can it sustain itself? But then also timing, can the team in a decentralized manner really ideate quickly and scale? We talked about that a little bit earlier. And then operations, so the O in ROSE, thinking through, can they be efficient with how they spend time? And so I believe when I was tuning in earlier, there was a discussion around whether what decisions should be made collectively and what decisions should be made independently. And thinking through whether or not the ecosystem has the decision-making protocols that are in place and tried and true. So you want to actually see an example of this at work is very important. Next letter being S, so speed. Again, innovate, iterate, innovate, iterate. That's the way that we do it when you think about a traditional structured company. But now in this decentralized world where there are so many different contributors who have varying degrees of involvement and contributions, can you kind of get into that groove in a way that makes sense? And then finally establish or dominate and grow. And so what we've actually seen is that there's many decentralized ecosystems that have popped up, and some of them are actually working in many different sectors. And some sectors are the same and they're doing complementary work. And so the reality is that the decentralized systems that we have in place allows for groups that have come together to collaborate in a way that's a bit easier than we've typically seen in the non-decentralized space. But we still want to be able to see if there can be someone who can be dominant in the space that they're operating in and the problem that they're trying to solve. And can they use relationships with other organizations to grow and sustain that growth and be better for their customers? And so hyper focusing on that row. So ready, team and timing, operations, efficiency, ROI, speed, innovation and iterations, and then E, can they establish themselves, dominate, and grow? And a lot of those answers oftentimes rely on having reliable data. So making sure that you have that in place and are adjusting your due diligence process to really kind of vet the needs or the unique challenges of decentralized organizations.
So interesting. And thank you for sharing about that Rose framework. I think it really helps people understand exactly how to understand what's happening like in the space, especially with the building of products. So now as we're coming, to the closing of your talk, I always like to end a lot of these different panels and talks with a question about how do we utilize decentralized ecosystems to try to help us exactly understand what's happening now and to make improvements for the future. So Iyore, what are your hopes for the future of building products in decentralized environments and ecosystems?
Absolutely. So my hope is centered on the concept of collaborative impact, the ability for many individuals with different expertise to come together to build better solutions. What you oftentimes see right now is that individuals who are operating in a decentralized ecosystem and knowingly doing so are technical or have some type of affinity towards tech first things. And so what you see is that there are tons of engineers and scientists coming together to solve problems. But as I mentioned earlier, we have to make sure that the incentives are aligned so that customers and potential investors and potential like corporations that might leverage these solutions understand some of the impacts and the opportunity at hand. And so right now, I don't think that we're seeing that in its fullest potential. But I believe that the future lies where you'll see different individuals, whether they're engineers and researchers or executives or investors or family offices, all coming together in a really interesting way on a particular focus or topic to solve a solution, create a product, and to scale it. So that's the future. We're seeing it work very well for the technical community. And I'm excited to see, different groups coming in. Our lawyer friends have dove in into DAOs very deeply. So we're seeing that presence. And I think that it'll definitely start to grow outwardly a lot more and be very exciting and something that others want to participate in, which is extremely important. And then also, what's really exciting is that in this realm, we can start to ask the question, like, can doing good ultimately be profitable? And so when we think about solutions that oftentimes fall in the impact sector, whether it's healthcare solutions, climate solutions, things that concern education and the future of cities, sometimes working on those things, even at the earliest stage, doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be profitable in the same way a normal B2B SaaS company would be, or that there's funding in the same way, or that people feel outside of the tech community that there should be some type of incentive. But now that we have the framework to think through how doing good can also be good for the world, but also good for a single individual, we're definitely opening the door for there to be solutions that actually start to solve some of these very, very complex problems. And then finally, because of the tokenomic kind of frameworks that we're seeing, even in like the DeSci space, it opens the door to kind of even use that as a framework to ensure that doing good means that all collaborators that are involved can feel that they incentively see a return on investment for not only their moral participation, but also their day in, day out participation.
Amazing. So I'm going to look into the chat to see if we have any questions. This has been so interesting so far. So let me see. Yes, we do have one. Yes, we have a question from Patrick Joyce. And so he said amazing talk and is really excited about this topic. So he said that he is curious about how you think about value capture for a DeSci token, and have there been any tokenomic models in the DeSci space that you're particularly excited about, especially because we know that in Web, 1.0 and 2.0, there were different companies like Kickstarter where organizations were able to crowdsource money in order to either build their MVP or to build products. So you had that sort of like crowdsourcing it. And now we're also seeing now in the D-side space where individuals now as members of communities through tokenomics are either giving tokens or paying for tokens, to be able to either pay as a vote to which projects are going to end up being funding, or to support a community either through their quote unquote pre-seed or seed funding to build those products. So what are your thoughts exactly about the value capture for our DeFi tokens and how that can be utilized for commercializing products?
Very interesting. So I think through a couple of things. So I think that the tokenomic infrastructure that we're seeing, and it allows both early contributors to really feel like they have a value or ownership stake within a specific entity. And then it allows individuals who don't necessarily have maybe the expertise in a sector to still be able to buy into the future early. And so it's really interesting because you see definitely this really kind of symbiotic relationship between equity that is earned with time, with work, and with interest. And then you also see kind of like this retail investing perspective and lens where someone who's very interested in something early can kind of still see those responses and those returns just because they're an early supporter. And so that's why when we think about what that actually means and unlocks for projects from both an investment side and a commercialization side is huge. From an investment side, oftentimes, as I mentioned earlier, when we think about research and development, there really isn't a solution yet that someone can look at a metric and say, this thing is performing well or not. But now that we have tokenomic models, you can actually use that to derive a metric for the community. And that in itself will allow individuals to be able to evaluate the health of a community that might be doing more research-oriented things that isn't shipping solutions yet. And so what that means is that that's a language that organizations can use to talk and collaborate with investors in very interesting ways. And then from a product commercialization standpoint, we have seen when people have ownership in something, they feel more inclined to make it succeed. Usually that ownership is achieved with customer interviews. There's a customer who's using it very early on. They feel like because they get to get features first, they're oftentimes giving feedback. But when you're building solutions, there's only so many features that you can ship. And sometimes that enthusiasm can wane. So with these structures in place, you can have people who own or hold a token feeling the excitement or kind of that they have something that makes them a part of it. And you'll be able to get a lot of those customer feedback conversations happening without thinking through maybe alternative incentive models that oftentimes we have to think about when we're not operating in a decentralized space. And then finally, when we think about kind of the question, how will challenges be addressed over time with products and solutions? The voting ecosystem is very important. Tons of technical individuals who collaborate with executives on the day in, day out. A lot of my teams and organizations that I'm working with are oftentimes frustrated because they don't feel like that marketing understands them, or they don't feel like that the business really is understanding the power and the prowess of the technology that's being built. When you have these voting structures, you have individuals who oftentimes feel like that their voice is not heard, or their direct kind of words are being lost in a game of telephone, that starts to be eliminated because these voting structures provide a place where you can speak and feel like you have actual, like you are a true stakeholder in what happens with the solution and how it evolves over time. And sure, you definitely have that when you reach a certain like leadership perspective in a normally kind of centralized company structure. But oftentimes in these innovation environments, it gets lost when people are trying to market it and scale very quickly. And the tokenomic models that are specifically being built, and I'm seeing leveraged very well in the DeSci space, will open the door for that, specifically when organizations get to the point where they commercialize their research.